There is a deeply unsettling truth beneath many of our actions, one that is not often spoken aloud, beneath the surface of our conscious choices, beneath even the desires we readily admit, lies an invisible current pulling us toward pain, toward collapse, toward an ending. This is not about obvious self-harm or deliberate attempts to end one's life. No, it is far subtler, a shadowy force woven into the fabric of the mind itself. It is a drive that, against all logic, seeks out suffering as if it holds a secret promise. For centuries it has been common to assume that human beings naturally avoid pain and pursue pleasure. It feels intuitive. Why would anyone want to suffer? The idea that our minds operate primarily to seek comfort and avoid distress has shaped much of our understanding about behavior, motivation, and survival. It is a comforting story. We are wired to live, to thrive, to protect ourselves from harm. But then life throws us contradictions, people who seem to sabotage their own success just when it appears within reach, relationships that spiral into familiar patterns of hurt, despite vows never to repeat them, addictions that bring momentary relief but long-term pain, recurring nightmares and habits that defy reason. These puzzles suggest a hidden script playing out beneath awareness, one that seems to challenge the very principle of self-preservation. What if there is within us a silent, insistent impulse not toward pleasure or life, but toward dissolution? What if, embedded in the depths of the psyche, there exists a drive that longs for stillness, for an erasure of tension, even at the cost of destruction? This idea disrupts the comfortable notion that all suffering is accidental or pathological. Instead, it suggests suffering can be a force in its own right, persistent, cyclical, almost magnetic. This video is an invitation to journey into that dark terrain. We will explore what it means to have an unconscious desire for destruction, why pain often repeats itself, and how this paradox shapes much of human existence. This is not an easy path. It offers no quick answers or neat solutions. But it does offer clarity, a light into the shadows where suffering hides. If you are ready to look deeply, to question what lies beneath your behaviors, then let's begin. The pursuit of pleasure, a foundation that isn't enough for a long time. The story of human behavior has been told as a pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. This idea is elegant in its simplicity. We seek comfort, security, and satisfaction. When faced with discomfort, we move away from it. When confronted with pleasure, we move toward it. Think about the most basic examples. A baby cries because it feels hunger or discomfort, and calms when fed. Adults seek warmth, companionship, distraction from worries. The mind, it seems, is a balancing system, constantly trying to restore equilibrium by discharging tension. This mechanism, often unconscious, guides much of our daily life. Yet, as we grow, we learn there is more to this story. The immediate pull of pleasure is tempered by a growing sense of reality, the need to delay gratification, to endure hardship for a greater goal. This ability to regulate impulses and consider long-term consequences is what makes us functional members of society. But even this expanded model leaves many questions unanswered. Why do some individuals repeatedly engage in behavior that causes suffering? Why does the mind sometimes seem to resist healing, returning compulsively to patterns that undermine growth? These phenomena hint at forces beyond simple pleasure-seeking or rational planning. The unseen drive toward disintegration beneath the surface of our conscious striving. There exists a force that neither pursues pleasure nor responds to reason. It is a drive toward undoing, toward unraveling the threads of psychic life. This drive does not announce itself openly. It moves quietly through self-sabotage, through impulses that disrupt success or happiness just as they appear possible. It manifests as an urge to repeat painful experiences, not to resolve them, but as if to confirm their existence. This is not a conscious desire. No one wakes up wanting to suffer or to destroy what they have built. Instead, it is a hidden script running silently beneath the will, pulling us toward stasis, toward erasure. It is the psychic equivalent of a return to zero. This force challenges our common sense assumptions about human nature. It reveals a complexity within the mind that refuses to be reduced to simple categories of good and bad, life and death, pleasure and pain. Instead, it suggests that at the core of existence is a paradox, a drive that seeks both creation and dissolution. The cycle of repetition, the unconscious's message. Why does this force express itself in repetition? Why do we return again and again to the scenes of our greatest pain? At first glance, this repetition seems like a flaw, a failure of memory or learning, but on a deeper level, it serves a function. The unconscious mind is not a linear thinker. It does not simply record experiences and move forward. Instead, it loops, it rehearses. It tries desperately to master what it cannot yet understand. When trauma or unresolved conflict lodges deep within, it refuses to be forgotten. It plays itself out repeatedly, in relationships, in patterns of failure, in moments of self-destruction. This is not cruelty or accident, but a desperate attempt to rewrite an unsolvable problem. Imagine a stage where the same tragic play is performed night after night, the actors hoping that this time the ending might change. But the script is frozen, the roles fixed, and the outcome the same. This is the unconscious's attempt to process pain that has been silenced or denied. The paradox of attachment to pain. Here lies one of the most perplexing aspects of human suffering. Over time, pain ceases to be just pain. It becomes a part of identity. When suffering becomes familiar, it forms a psychic home, a strange comfort zone. To let go of pain is to risk losing something fundamental. It threatens the very sense of self that has been built around that pain. This often stems from early experiences where love, recognition, or safety were bound up with suffering, where to be seen meant to endure hardship, and affection came with strings attached. The mind learns to equate pain with presence, abandonment with connection. Thus, the mind becomes addicted, not in the conscious sense, but in the deep psychic structures, to suffering. It clings to pain because it fears the unknown space that would open if pain were removed. This makes recovery not just a matter of willpower but a profound identity challenge. Toward transformation, the work of elaboration. Is liberation possible from this cycle? The answer is yes, but it demands more than hope or superficial change. True transformation comes from elaboration, bringing the unconscious into the light of awareness. This means facing the pain directly, not to eradicate it, but to understand and integrate it. The process is akin to mourning, recognizing loss, accepting it, and gradually moving forward without denial. When pain is elaborated, it loses its silent power to control. It becomes part of one's story rather than an unrelenting force. This transformation is neither quick nor easy. It requires courage to confront original wounds, to question long-held beliefs about self, and to inhabit the void that remains when suffering no longer dominates identity. But it's not enough to merely identify the presence of internal scripts. The deeper question becomes, what is the origin of these scripts? What ancient emotional contracts were silently signed in our formative years, contracts that still bind us long after we've forgotten the terms? These early pacts, formed in response to fear, rejection, abandonment, or pain, are the soil from which many self-defeating patterns grow. The child who learns that love must be earned through suffering, that success breeds isolation, or that desire is dangerous, does not forget these lessons simply by growing older. They remain encrypted within the unconscious, shaping adult behavior with invisible hands. And so, the journey inward must pass through the labyrinth of our earliest experiences, not to relive them, but to rewrite the terms of those unconscious agreements. Here lies the great paradox. To be free, we must return. Not to dwell in the past, but to extract its roots from our present. Because until those roots are seen, named, and mourned, they will continue to sprout the same stories. That is why self-knowledge is not a luxury. It is a necessity for transformation. Yet this knowledge is not simply intellectual. It is experiential, emotional. It arrives not as an idea, but as a realization that stirs the body, disturbs the heart, and brings tears that have waited for decades to be shed. To truly see oneself is not just to understand one's thoughts, but to feel, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of one's history, and to cradle it with compassion. And yet, this is where many turn away. Because facing ourselves means encountering the parts we have long disowned, the envious parts, the angry parts, the frightened, needy, chaotic parts. We have built identities on the illusion of control and coherence, and to invite in what we have exiled feels like a threat to our very sense of being. But this is the threshold every transformation demands, the willingness to allow disorder before a new order can emerge. It is a descent, and all descents are disorienting. But descent is not destruction, it is initiation. Only by descending into the dark corridors of the psyche can one ascend with greater wholeness. And herein lies another crucial truth. Pain that is faced with awareness becomes a teacher. A map, not because suffering is inherently noble, but because within it lies information. The patterns that cause us pain are not arbitrary, they are structured. They are narratives repeated over time, waiting to be revised. When approached with courage and curiosity, they begin to speak, and what they often say is this is how you tried to survive. What appears as dysfunction was once adaptation, the rigidity, the avoidance, the sabotage. They were attempts to feel safe in a world that once felt threatening. But strategies for survival do not always serve the flourishing of the self. What kept us safe then may now keep us stuck. So the work becomes this: to thank the old strategies for what they once provided, and then to release them. Not by force, but by understanding. Because what we understand, we no longer need to repeat. When pain is fully seen, it begins to loosen its grip. When the pattern is spoken aloud, it begins to lose its secrecy. And when we choose for the first time to respond differently, to not abandon ourselves in the moment of fear, to not collapse when shame returns, we begin to step outside of the cycle. This is not dramatic. Often it is subtle, quiet, a single new choice made with awareness, but it is a revolution nonetheless. Still, this revolution is not instantaneous. The unconscious does not yield its power overnight. It tests us. It returns with temptations of old comforts, old identities, and so the work of transformation is not a single moment, but a practice, a discipline of honesty, of reflection, of inner listening. The question becomes not how do I get rid of this pain, but what does this pain want me to understand? In this way, suffering ceases to be the enemy and becomes a messenger, not because it is good, but because it is real. And to engage with what is real is the beginning of healing, but we must go deeper still. If suffering becomes identity, as we've explored, then who are we without it? This is one of the most terrifying questions the psyche can encounter. Because in many cases, pain has not just accompanied us, it has defined us. It has given us meaning, purpose, even a sense of specialness. To no longer be the one who suffers may feel like a loss of self. The mind, when faced with the vastness of being without a wound to hide behind, can panic. This is why healing is often followed by an unexpected sadness, the grief of letting go of a version of oneself that, while painful, was familiar. But beyond this grief is something extraordinary, the emergence of a self not organized around trauma, a self not defined by lack but by potential. This self does not seek validation through suffering, nor identity through repetition. It is not driven by the need to reenact the past, but by the freedom to create the future. It is this possibility that makes all the painful work worthwhile. Because once the unconscious begins to speak in the language of the conscious, something sacred happens. The script becomes a story, and the story can be rewritten. And yet, this is not the end, because the unconscious is not a one-time excavation. It is a living landscape. New layers will emerge, new memories will surface, new patterns will be revealed, but the difference is this: now you are equipped. Now you can face what arises not with fear, but with familiarity. You have descended once, you know the terrain, and with each descent, the ascent becomes easier. You are no longer trapped in the repetition, you are in dialogue with it. This is the real power of inner work. It does not promise perfection, it does not erase pain, but it grants presence, the ability to remain, to witness, to stay in the body when everything in you wants to flee. It offers the strength to speak what was once unspeakable. It offers the clarity to choose where once you only reacted, and above all, it offers a home within yourself, a place that suffering no longer governs, but where your full complexity is welcomed, held, and honored. And perhaps this is the quiet miracle of the whole process, that through facing what is darkest in us, we uncover something deeply luminous, our capacity to hold complexity, to endure contradiction, to live not in denial of our suffering, but in dialogue with it. We learn to differentiate pain from identity, pattern from destiny, history from possibility, and in that space of differentiation, something wholly new becomes possible. You become the author of your inner life. And from that authorship, everything changes, relationships shift, habits soften, goals align with values, not because the world has changed, but because your relationship to it has. Where once you were driven by unconscious repetition, now you are guided by conscious intention. Where once you acted from inherited scripts, now you create from lived truth. This is not theoretical, it is deeply practical. It touches every choice, every interaction, every dream you dare to pursue. And the most profound part, this journey never really ends, because the psyche is infinite in its depth. There is always more to discover, always more to reclaim, always more to become, and so the invitation remains open, not to fix yourself, but to know yourself. Not to eliminate the shadow, but to learn its language, not to seek perfection, but to cultivate presence, because in the end, it is not pain that shapes us, but what we choose to do with it. It is not trauma that defines us, but the meaning we dare to make from it. And it is not the death drive that wins, but the part of us that insists on seeing, feeling, naming, and transforming what was once endured in silence. This is the path of inner freedom, not the freedom from pain, but the freedom through it. And if you've listened this far, perhaps something in you already knows this. Perhaps a part of you has been waiting not for answers, but for the courage to finally ask the right questions. And if that is true, then trust it. Because the journey has already begun,